They not like us. They not like us. They not like
Real Dads, Real Talk, Ohana. Welcome back. It's been a while since I've been able to kind of sit in this chair, have some great dialogue with another great father, another great husband. We spent some time away in order to kind of refine our systems and processes, work some things behind the scene. I was able to participate in some other podcasts with some mentors in the building where I work, and was able to kind of shape me and kind of shape the direction of this podcast, which is, truly magnificent in itself, right? It talks about teaching each other growth and the ability for us to be able to connect with other people. Today, my special guest is Craig Morton. This is honestly my first time meeting Mr. Morton in person. We had a brief phone conversation, but I was introduced to him through Wybitra Jordan, AKA Boss Lady, AKA Mom Dad if you're my wife. Fantastic woman, and everything that she has kind of done for my family shaped us. And when we did the episode with Mr. Jordan in the beginning and her son, JJ, she said that there is a guest that we have to absolutely bring on to the podcast, and that was Mr. Morton. And just from hearing his story briefly, without a doubt, we had to get him here so we can, learn from each other and kind of share some dialogue. So, Mr. Craig Morton, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir, if you can briefly introduce yourself and provide a little background for us.
Sure. So first and foremost, I'm humbled by having to have me on the show, right? But, I appreciate it, and thanks for the opportunity. Don't take it lightly, but name's Craig Morton. Currently, I'm married, been married for 23 years, coming up here in November, on November the 10th, and father of 4.
Right.
I'm a Christian, which means my worldview is patterned after Christ and after the scriptures. So my opinions and perspectives are informed through that filter,
right?
If you will. And I try to, lead my family in that way, try to engage my wife that way, as well as my daughters in a way that would, one, reflect those beliefs and those professions, and as well as to try to, help them to also have a good pattern to follow after. I grew up in the D.C. metro area. I was born in Virginia, but was raised in Northeast D.C., finished up high school in Friendly High School.
Okay.
I lived in Oxon Hill, Maryland. And during the time, the whole D.C. metropolitan area was kind of a rough spot to be in. We carried the label of being a murder capital.
Right.
And I was a single parent mom. Even though I was the only child, still was a single parent. And I think a lot of what I encountered growing up in the area was centered around fear. Fear that I would fall into some of the traps that a lot of my peers have fallen into. Fear that, my mom really was like, hey, I'm here by myself. I really don't know, what I'm doing raising him. And I don't have a lot of male influences. My dad was in and out of my life. And so it's kind of against that backdrop that a lot of, some of my experiences that I brought into fatherhood is kind of, outlined as well. So.
Right.
So I don't know if you want more.
No, that I think that out of that initially kind of brings me to a couple of things that I'd like to dig into. Maybe a little bit of a correlation first. I'm also from this area, D.C. My dad kind of grew up in D.C., even though he's a South Carolina boy. He kind of grew up in the same area that you kind of grew up in. Also, I grew up in a single parent household. My dad was homeless at 14 years old. So he was in and out of cars, making his own way. And I will say that it shapes him. Right now, me and my dad, we're not on speaking terms. We've probably been in that way for a little bit over a year, just based off of certain things that as a man, I'm not going to tolerate anymore. But I understand how his upbringing, his life has kind of shaped him to be a certain way. But you get old enough that hey man, this isn't the right way to kind of parent anymore. Yeah. So I guess my first question for you would be some of those experiences and growing up and kind of in, we will say the DC area, especially Northeast, how did those experiences kind of shape you and your ideologies going into fatherhood?
So I mean, a lot of focus was around, who could book the most honeys, and who could have the most females, and all of that type of stuff. And so by me having daughters, I'm keenly aware of that particular background and experience. Again, this is what I grew up in, and this is something that I was fearful of. I used to say in college, me and a friend of mine, we used to just talk about, man, we just want boys. Just want to start in 5. But it wasn't so much that so I could tell them to go out and sow raw oats and all of that type of stuff. I was really talking from my perspective, how could I deposit the type of male figures into the society that would say, yeah, it's okay to be a virgin. Yeah. It's okay to not go out here and try to get all the notches on the belt and all of that type of stuff, and really give some guys that's going to be ready to actually lead a family and be a positive investment in young women's life. I mean, my mother used to tell me, like, Craig, you see what I go through with your dad. If you don't want to be with a woman, don't waste her time. And so those are the kinds of things that, as I was raising girls, I'm concerned about. Like, hey, look, I want them to be able to have an example of, a male figure that's different from a lot of what we see in the hip hop and a lot of what we see, advertised.
Out here, Cardi B?
I mean, I don't even know all the names, but yeah, I'm familiar with Cardi B though. But yeah, I'd like them to have a different approach when it comes down to, the type of meal that they should have in my house. I mean, if you can ask any of them, they would tell you, like, nah, I can't bring a guy around with his underwear showing and all this. It's not so much that I told them not to, but they just know what I stand for. And
you
they
know
what exactly. So, and it's interesting when you talk about your dad. I don't want to veer too far off script.
No, you're good.
But what part of South Carolina is your dad from? 'Cause my dad's from
McCall,
South Carolina.
So very, very, very small town, just south of Laurinburg, North Carolina.
Okay.
I spent some time down there too.
Okay.
When honestly, right after birth, up until a very young age, it was my grandmother who raised me and my siblings in this small trailer home in McCall, South Carolina. So, he. And that's what I say. I understand, right? I get it. Yeah. And his first was a girl, was a daughter. Okay. I honestly felt like that was God's lick back. Like, I'm gonna teach. I'm gonna teach you a lesson real quick, right? And kind of have to shape your mentality. And I would say my sister is just like the fellas, just like the boys, because she grew up kind of with this headstrong father that was raising her to be a king and a queen. He took certain approaches that I think he probably wishes that he can take back.
For sure.
But I think that was able to kind of almost not soften him, but kind of open his aperture a little bit. But then he had straight boys afterwards, right? Okay. And then for him, I felt like that was like, okay, now I get to kind of raise y'all and to be who I wanted to be. And I honestly think he used to say it. He would remind us all the time, y'all ain't grow up the way I grew up. Y'all ain't got it this way and that way. And I'm like, isn't that what you want? Isn't that what you would want as a father, to like not put your kids through the same things you had to grow up in?
Right.
Do you think that your parenting style or ideologies would have changed if you had the starting 5 boys that you wanted?
Yeah, so I think so. I think it would have been tougher on my boys than I was on my girls, and I'm not saying that was fair. Yeah. I just think I would have probably managed them a little differently, with a different standard, a different expectation of excellence. But I don't know though. I mean, I put a decent level of pressure on my girls as well to do well, to learn, and not just go out and try to compete to perform to get a grade, but to actually learn and develop, so that they could, develop the character as well as the ability to be contributors in society, right? And so I don't know. It's hard to tell too, because I don't have boys, right? So it's kind of
You think you'll be one way.
Yeah, it's one. It's a guess. It's a toss up. Nobody has a crystal ball. I don't know.
Absolutely. I think you said, would it have been fair? I was just having this discussion with Priya the other day, out to dinner with our fellow dating couple, and the topic came up about how I said that Maverick, my baby, he's gonna have it rough, and I don't shy away from it. And of course, now she's like, I'm gotta protect my baby boy.
Right.
No, like we need to equip and prepare him for things you can't protect him from.
Right.
You know, you just don't understand that life of a black male growing up and all the unfairness that will come for that.
Right.
You know, so I don't think that it's unfair to say, oh, I would have been a little bit different with your boys, because honestly, boys need that. We got to grow up in a little bit of a tougher environment to equip us to carry certain loads as a father, as a Christian, and all of the roles that you are carrying that you talked about, you know, how you're trying to lead your family. You got to put on a lot of different hats. And if I, raise you to coddle you and not teach you what toughness is about, or not instilling you resiliency and perseverance, you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
And you're never going to be able to lead a nest.
I think that coddling piece that you're talking about, and just what I think Generation X has done to some of the following generations, because they don't want their kids necessarily to have it as difficult as they had, or they feel like corporal punishment is not necessary. I'm in no way in favor of any kind of abuse or anything like that.
Right.
As a matter of fact, my kids probably stopped getting spankings by the time before they were even out of like elementary school or any of that. But the fact of the matter is, they need discipline and structure. And they need to understand, I think, authority, and need to be able to appreciate it, and need to understand that the world doesn't revolve around them. And so one of the most impactful things my mom said to me at one point in time growing up was that, hey, I deal with you because you're my son. The world's not going to deal with your attitude. So it was a balance of a little bit of a friction, a tug and pull that she had to deal with. She was trying to raise me with a level of confidence, a level of, expecting excellence, expecting more, but at the same time, a level of humility, like, hey, you're not all that, you're not God's gift to the world, per se. And so that was an interesting dynamic that she had to deal with as a single parent. And when we talk about not being able to give the opposite sex what they need in terms of rearing, yeah, she couldn't teach me how to be a man, but I think that it was incumbent upon me to understand what that looked like and not make excuses. Eventually, I'm gonna be held accountable for my decisions. Right. So learning accountability, I can't always make excuses. People talk about you're a product of your environment. Well, you can also learn what not to do and learn what not to be from that environment as well. And I can only give the glory to God for helping me to have that particular outlook on it versus saying I'm just going to continue to reproduce after what I'm saying. And that was something else my mom used to say, look, just because you live in the ghetto doesn't mean that you have to stay. Right. Doesn't mean that you have to continue to reproduce the same thing. You could break this. These are lessons I learned from her. You could break the cycle. So while she was not telling me how to be a man, she was giving me principles that I think that they transferable. They go across from being a man or being a woman. These are pattern interruptions. Right. Things that you don't have to continue doing these things. You can have a better pathway in life, and you're gonna be blessed for it if you make different decisions. Right.
And it goes back to something that I would tell my soldiers in command was there were 3 abilities. There was predictability. I'm gonna provide you. Right, but we all know that something's going to happen, and I need you to have adaptability. And then when you finally get to that second ability, the last one is something that's always going to go wrong. Now I need you to have accountability, and that accountability is a very big piece for me, and that's what I try to almost mirror my own parenting lifestyle around. And with that accountability, I have fucked up immensely, like so many avenues that I've gone wrong, right? I didn't hold my head down and be like, oh, I'm a bad parent because I made this mistake. I'd be like, yo, I just gotta learn from it. I wouldn't call it abuse, but my dad he grew up old school, right? I watched, my oldest sister, I would say, watch her get drugged down some stairs. I watched my oldest brother go to school bleeding out his mouth with a broken sternum. Me and my older brother, I dragged him into this mess, but I wanted to impress a girl around his age. He's 4 years older than me, and I remember taking some earrings off my stepmom's some dresser, and I tried to give them to this girl down the street, and she wouldn't take them. And I remember walking back, and this was in Laurel, Maryland. I remember walking back, and I threw them in this guy's grass. And for whatever way, my dad is like a PI. Man, he pieced this whole story together. For about a week, they were trying to figure out what his earrings were. And I was like, I don't know, right?
Like,
Come to find out these earrings were like $500. And this was back in, so that was pretty penny.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me tell you, I got whipped so bad. And my dad thought my brother was a part of this whole story. But I remember having, I had whelps on my leg, had whelps on my back, had whelps on the back of my neck. So I remember taking that whooping. But let me tell you, I ain't never steal from my household ever again.
Right.
But did that input match the desired outcome of what he wanted? He was a yes. Right? I taught you're not gonna steal from this household. But for the mental things that I did probably to him, right, when he sat back and a little bit older and realized that, and then the mental psyche of my siblings, the way we grew up hostile. Like we were going to let you know if we had a problem, we was only going to take care of it one way. Right. But how quickly did I learn later on in life, like the worst ass whooping you can take is a pencil ass whooping, right? That's that pen and paper, and now you can't really go out there and do much. So, there's a fine line between discipline and there's a fine line, and then being completely over the top. I would say that I was over the top, and. Yeah,
with your kids, you were over the top?
No. I am completely different than I thought that I would be going into fatherhood. I'm major new. I put him, and this is probably crazy to some people, but I put him in prison the other day. Not the other day. This was kind of like towards the end of last school year. And just room was a mess. All these things was a mess. And I was just like, yo, you can't get these things together. Right. I will alter your way of life. And I don't believe in putting my hands on kids because of the way I was raised. So I put him in prison. I was like, yo, you will close your door. That is your cell. You can go in there. You don't have no phone. You got your bed. Ain't no TVs. Ain't no nothing. And then
no creature comforts.
None of that. Meet me at the door when it's time for you to go get food. And then I'll escort you down. I'm going to inspect your room, face the wall. So I made him put his nose to the wall. Right, and that was like a little bit of humiliation, right? Because I'm trying to teach him humility with dignity, and like just all because you couldn't do the small things, right? Right. And then my wife was like, "You don't calm down, man. You don't need all that, like prison, right?" And then I realized, I took a step back, I was like, you know what, you're absolutely right. I shouldn't have been calling that a prison because one, why are we thinking that way? Why are we thinking like
set of conditioning
that we have to put ourselves in chains and in bars in order to try to teach you structure? So I backed off of that, right? And I realized when you just sit back and kind of communicate to your kids conversations and here's the why, understanding is again just making sure that we're kind of like trying to instill that discipline in the right way. So shout out to your mom for instilling that discipline without going old school, probably getting that hot.
Oh, she went old school.
Old school? She got the hot pan with the grits?
Well, not the hot pan and grits and all that, but my bad. But when you talk about welts and all that other stuff, I'm like, my mom was the same thing you see on these comedy shows, this hurts me worse than it hurts you.
Right. Sure, Mama.
I ain't whooping nothing that I bought. Take the clothes off. Right. Oh, yeah, I got the whole full Monty. In fact, I started saying that my mom was probably the one who invented rap because they would call her from school sometimes And she'd get me on the phone, my heart beating out of my chest, and she's like, you know your behind is mine, right? And I'm thinking about this from 2 o'clock in the afternoon all the way till she gets home. I'm hoping she forgot about it.
No,
So, nah.
they don't forget. They don't forget.
And even if she acted like she forgot, woke me up in the middle of the night, pulled the cover back and going at it. So yeah, I got served up, and I got friends and people that witnessed it too.
Right.
People that'll tell you, yeah, I remember.
And they ain't come to your aid and help.
What,
Nope.
what they gonna do? They gonna take the beating too?
Right.
Shoot. Yeah, got it at church, got it at home, got it in school,
Not the
got
church.
it everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, she didn't discriminate. So I
Yeah,
like it.
and she felt, and there was times she tried to come back and apologize for it, but I said, Mom, you know what? There's no apology necessary. Especially as I got older and started understanding just how desperate she was to not lose me. And I believe that she did. She got my heart early on, and I think that I didn't want to get in any trouble. I didn't want to disappoint her. It wasn't so much I was scared of her as much as I was scared to hurt her.
Right.
I just didn't want to disappoint her, And I did respect, I do respect my mom as well.
Yeah, same thing. My dad probably will watch this and he'll probably be like, heartbroken in whatever way. He'll be like, dang, how could he say that? But in all honesty, I'm just gonna always speak the truth, right?
Yeah.
And we gotta be accountable for things that have happened. I don't fault him. Shout out actually to him. At the end of the day, he did the best job that he knew how to do at the time, but with the tools and resources that he was provided in order to try to parent. The hardest job is to raise a child. It is not easy.
Yeah.
It will expose you. 100%. It's going to show your weaknesses. It's going to test your patience.
Yep.
My wife gets tested every single day when it's about 7 o'clock and she getting pre-made shirts and Amara's like, oh, I'm about to tap in.
Yep.
You think it's bedtime and how quickly a woman with a lot of patience, I can quickly fuse going to go.
Yeah, it just diminishes.
Fast, right?
Right.
So, and I would say at the end of the day, you brought up the word fear. I think that was the reason why he parented the way he did, especially raising 5 boys. Like, yeah, I'm terrified.
Yeah.
Because of one of what happened to me during my life, and then 2, how do I prepare you and shape you for what the world is going to give you.
For sure.
Right? And so for him to grow up the way he did, I think honestly some of it was I want to make you physically tough. Because if I can beat your behind, if I give you these licks, with some other cat gonna do you that's your same age, ain't gonna be able to phase you, right?
Right.
And it worked a little bit, right? So it was like, yo, my dad beat me like this. This ain't you ain't bringing nothing. I hope you got a whole party with you because we're gonna get a
That's
show.
what it's
So
gonna take.
right. So you mentioned that fear, but being old school, kind of growing up in that era, what was your biggest concern? Right, not using the word fear. What was your biggest concern with raising, your firstborn? Now it was your time. To shape everything that your mom had passed on to you, or it was your time in the seat. What was that like?
It's a tough question for me to really answer, just because it just seems like we were just in it. We were just trying to survive, trying to make the best decisions possible. We had, kids back to back, and I was just, I don't know, I think I was just a proud papa. I loved her, I carried her around with me, and things that I was concerned about, it was probably more just in making sure I was providing for her at the time. I mean, it wasn't, I can't really say that I was, I kind of talked earlier about principles, kind of, I didn't want my daughters to be the ones the guys talk about are rollers or for the streets,
Right.
Stuff like that. And I just wanted them to make better decisions than me, and better decisions than I had made growing up in areas of, promiscuity, drugs and alcohol. I mean, I wasn't on drugs, but but as far as alcohol and things like that, just abusing the body and doing things that would put them in a compromising position where they make decisions that long term is going to be a potential detriment to them. I want them to keep their options open. And the only way you can keep your options open is if you make good quality decisions to keep your options open, so that you don't get in that box, so to speak, where you're locked in and you're limited to the things that you could do because of some of the decisions you make. Does it always work? No. I mean, I've had daughters that have made mistakes, so we try to support them and love them and try to redirect and correct.
Right.
And but going back to the beginning, I don't even know if I was even thinking that way.
Right.
Like, what are we gonna do and stuff like that. Probably happened after we had the fourth one. It's like, how we gonna handle all this?
Right.
Because it came back to back, so to speak. The last three did. Anyway.
What's the age gap kind of between all those?
So from the first one to the second is 6 years, and then
Okay.
from the last three, it was like 15 months and then 20 months,
Okay.
22 months, something like that.
So you're almost near
wasn't-
the Irish twins too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're pretty close.
Yeah. Like, I mean, at one point in time, they're all like, when Christina, she turns 18 on this month, and then I think at that point they'll be 18, 19, and 20.
Right.
And then Micaiah, she'll turn 21 in November,
Right.
and then the gap is there again. But for about 30, 45 days, they are like steppers, boom, 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 in
Right.
age. In fact, one graduated last year and one graduated the year before last year. And then I got this one that's graduating, well, actually, one graduated 2 years ago, and then one graduated, I don't know the years. But
Right.
anyway, I got two that graduated back to back. Then I had a break, and then we got one that's graduating this year.
All right,
So,
that's good stuff. What do you think? Would you say was your biggest failure for one, and then your biggest success as a father?
So early on, we were in a dual income house where my wife was working and I was working, but I had a little more flexibility being in sales, so I was always at the school with the
Okay.
girls, and the teachers and their friends and stuff, they knew me, but they didn't really know my wife, comparatively speaking, and so I kind of wore that as a badge of honor, but as they got older and then my wife started to become more available, I disengaged in really the curriculum and the scholastic part of things. I would set expectations, but I wouldn't necessarily be heavily involved with what their studies were and stuff like
Right.
that. Although I'm the one that is tasked with the responsibility of helping with any writing assignments and
Okay.
helping to edit and stuff like that. But for the most part, how they were, performing against the criteria of graduation and what the expectations are and all of that, my wife handled all of that, and she knew all of that. So the biggest mistake for me, I think, is when I'm answering the question is that I disengaged on the scholastics. And I think I made the mistake of, just because I'm there, that I'm present.
Right.
And so I think there's a difference between being present and actually active. Although there's an argument to say that we kind of delegated responsibilities because we
Right.
had to. I went and was focused on one thing or another. But I think if anything, that's something that I wish, because I always feel like I'm playing catch up in knowing, where they are with their assignments, where they are with scholastics and stuff as they move through school. And now they're in college, is not that big a deal, but it's the same thing with my baby girl, where I still feel like I'm just trying to catch up. And then it's like, once I got behind on all of that, it was no catching up because my wife is running with it.
Right. It's hard. Like,
Yeah.
in these types of platforms and having discussions, again, it just shows the power that we need to continue to have these discussions, because you never know what a person has already experienced that you're possibly going through, and sometimes we suffer in silence. What you're speaking on, my household is going through at this moment. I work in the Pentagon, and so I am dropping off of mine, and I'm there. I work in the skiff, so ain't no phones. I'm radio silent, and by the
Right.
time me and Amira are walking in the door, it's about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and Major has gone home, talked to Pre, maybe for a couple of seconds, and then he's off to pre-teenage stuff, and then we're either going to practice or I'm preparing for the next fight the next day, so my brain doesn't turn off,
Right.
and my wife's brain doesn't turn off. If she's not doing pre-made, she's doing realtor work. She's not doing realtor work. She's doing DOD contracting. She's not doing DOD contracting. She's doing something. Right. Something to help other people. Just the other day, we were talking about it with our date couple, and I was like, yo, we're going to start giving each other grades, like how well you did. My wife got an F last week. I gave her a fat F, right? But she got an F because she's wearing herself super thin. Right. It's only 24 hours in the day, but she is a boss and she's a queen, so she's always trying to stay on the go. Right. And so I'm kind of doing the same thing, right? I go home and I go into a little bit of the house dad roles, either the cooking, the cleaning, and putting Amara down. Amara's a little bit of my twin. She is 100% a dad girl, or I think that's right, dad girl. Yeah, yes, Priya, you lost that fight. So congratulations. She's all about her dad. But my wife, like I said, one of those 3 jobs, and then always has Maverick tied to her hip. So a screaming baby all day, right? And then when we are finally able to kind of have that moment of like peace, it's kind of like brain quickly opens up and it's like next task that we got to complete. So I'm kind of going through the same thing that I'm trying to pull myself out of, and figuring out, making sure that I'm giving the right amount of deliberate love, attention, and focus. That was the word that just came to mind. To each child, deliberate. Right? I have to make sure, I don't care what it is, but if we have to be late on something, we got to take something off, we got to do whatever it takes just to make sure that the kids get deliberate time, because these are formidable years, especially for the 2 infant ones, but for Major as well, and being deliberate about everything that we're doing. But going back to the F, so she got an F because by the end of the week she's like worn out, right? And I see her, and I still, even last week, I always try to do sweet gifts for her. So went to the mall, I got her favorite Bath and Body candles and new iPhone and things like that, and she was just like, I got an F last week and I got gifts. I was like, because what you're doing is what she does is she's always about helping other people. Good. Even the jobs that she has, realtor, about helping people accomplish your dreams. The contract and helping people communicating, and then small business, and then the pre-made, designing shirts, cups, and all that type of stuff for other people. That's something that I can get behind, right? But it comes a little bit to where do I got to pull you back from to protect you almost from yourself. And then now you just highlighted almost the same thing for myself, that I got to look internal and go down the line and be like, Major, have I done something deliberate every day? Have we had a full conversation? Done the same thing. I'd be like, homework done? Yep. When I probably should be like, hey, is your homework done? Like, what kind of homework did you have? Like, what's going on? Because it's hard, but some days I accept that. I'm just like, all right, he said he's done, he's good. Let me go to the next task. And so I appreciate you highlighting that, because that's something, again, that we're going through. What would you say is your biggest success? I heard all of the graduations, and I would say you sound like you got a lot of success there. What would you quantify as that one?
So, biggest success? I would say that the biggest success is probably that I created a level of stability in my family. Right. That my kids can look at me and and I'm predictable to them. I mean, you talked about the 3 things that you gave your troop, I think it was earlier.
The 3 abilities?
The 3 abilities. And it's funny that you say that, because 2 of those abilities are mine, the accountability and the predictability.
Amen.
And I think that too often families break down, or kids break down and wives, or it could be vice versa, or it could be the woman that leaving you unsure, and leaving you in a I guess an unstable state. Right. Is he going to be on time? Can I trust that he's going to be there? Do I know where he or she is? Those kinds of things. And so I've tried to be consistent and predictable, so that breeds stability within my household. So I think that's been the biggest thing. My kids know that I love my wife. They know I'm not perfect, but they know that they've seen a man that has sacrificed and has pursued his wife and also loves them and has done anything that I can do that is within my ability to demonstrate that faithfulness to them and that commitment to them and what's important to them. And make one example even of today. Prior to coming over here, I'm picking up my daughter from her job to take her to volleyball practice, and she left her shoes at home. So we had to go buy some shoes for practice. Versus saying, hey, you're gonna come over here and sit with me while I record this session, and you'll just miss practice.
Right.
It costs you something, you know. Now, I'm not gonna say that we're gonna be able to do that every time.
Right.
You can't be frivolous and just continue to mess up. But if she makes a mistake, then she got to know that I'm in her corner to try to help her to still deliver on the things that's important to her.
Right.
And so that's just, that's one example, but that's a consistent thing. Like if you told that story to any one of my other daughters, none of them would be surprised.
Right.
That, oh, what, dad did that? My wife, she wouldn't be surprised. Might be surprised that it happened, but they wouldn't be surprised that I made that move to try to make sure that I'm supporting her. So I think that consistency, stability, being predictable, those are invaluable gifts, I believe, that I give my daughters, so that they can grow up and take stability into their relationships and not feel uneasy. I wish I could codify it a little better in my answer, but I think that's the.
I don't think you could have communicated any better, and that's I take a lot of what you just said into heart, because I'll tell you honestly, had Major did that, Major be sitting right over there in that chair, right? So you went the extra step, and so every opportunity is not a way to always teach our kid the bad consequences of, and so I take away from you. You took the opportunity to show compassion and empathy and understanding that everybody out here makes a mistake. Yeah. You can't, just imagine if for me, right, I'm a big religious person, if God was like, yo, I'm gonna make you pay every time you make a mistake, I am not going far, right? So I just applaud you for doing that and just going the extra mile and saying, you know what, we have the ability. Two is something that you said, just showing them by loving your wife. I think that is probably one of the biggest things that we can teach our kids is how to love. And that is, they are watching, how we interact. Kids can tell if parents are having an issue. Kids can tell if parents are loving on each other. That is also something that has to be done with deliberateness. And me and my wife, we've tried to make it a part to hey, whatever, we got to find one. Walk into the house, where's the other person, right? And hug and kiss, and just take a pause and a moment of embrace. One, we never know what each other have been going throughout the day, because we're kind of disconnected. I really don't have the phone. I check on her kind of by the hour, but to have that moment of embrace. And when we do that, I can probably guarantee Mav is going to smile for whatever reason, and Amira's, she's giving her little goofy smile and running up to one of us, right? That right there shows that we're hunting the right dog and on the right track. So I just applaud you for doing those two things and going the extra mile. I know we're getting close on time, but I saw something on Facebook today and it's actually pretty frustrating, and I applaud myself for not responding to this. I'm gonna call him a goofy because he's a goofy. But he said that men should only cry if there was a death. Any other type of crying for a man is pure weakness. And I read it, and I was about to start, but I executed tactical patience. And I'm reading the comments, and women are like, "That is pathetic."
Right.
That is pure ignorance. Or somebody said that this is why black men go and commit suicide. This is why black men suffer, is because we are teaching weakness. What are your thoughts on black men and just men in general, right? Let's not even say black men, just
about showing that level of emotion. So I'll make a shameless plug. I don't know if it'll be edited out or not, but for menofjoy.net.
Okay. menofjoy.net.
Get a chance, Google it. And here's a safe place where men are able to express transparently the issues of life in a forum where it's confidential and you're able to get counseling and give counseling. Right? People that have gone the road and done these things already, they can speak into your life. And vice versa, you can speak into other people's lives. And so we had this forum where we meet, it's 365 days a year. And we reshaped this idea of masculinity. You know, it's not just the macho man that can't be phased emotionally, but we're a whole man, we're a whole person, where we understand, hey, there's times when where we might have to shed tears because we experience pain. If you're a full person, you experience emotions, will, and intellect. So you have all of those things, not just will and intellect, not just only emotions when somebody passes away. Is that what they said?
Yes.
No, not just that time, but it's an important point you make, because that's something my dad said to me, something similar to that, when my great aunt passed away, which was his aunt, but she was kind of like almost like a grandmother to me because she helped raise me, and she died when I was 15 years old. And so when I was at her funeral, I was undone because Aunt Emma, you know, that was my my ace. And he sat beside me and said, "Hey man, I'll be doing all that crying." And I responded to him, what if that was me up there? You wouldn't be crying?
Right.
And he really didn't know what to say. So he was just cut from a different cloth. I mean, cut from a different era, I guess. You know, maybe it's that baby boom. Is that the baby? I guess it was the baby boom era that, you know, stiff upper chin, you know, keep a stiff upper lip or whatever.
Right.
And just deal with it. But I think that is very appropriate. I call myself a big softie in a lot of ways. I probably cry too much on things, but I think that I'm in touch with, you know, my sensitive side, and I think it allows me to demonstrate empathy for someone because I've experienced something similar, or because I want them to know I care. And the same thing, I want my girls to have empathy and have the ability to demonstrate that the other person is important. We got to be concerned about the others and ourselves. And so I think that's, you know, and sometimes that expresses itself in tears.
Right. I would say for anybody out there, menofjoy.com?
.net.
menofjoy.net. I recommend, you know, any male that finds themselves needing, you know, someone to go talk to go have a conversation. Go out there and utilize that resource. You know, this also kind of goes into, you know, men in therapy and how it's viewed as weakness. I think any man that feels like he can't shed a tear is a broken man, right? And you can be as tough as you want to be, but you're not going to go far. I don't care who you think you are, how tough you are, what hood you grew up in, how many I don't care. Right? Everybody has a weakness, right? And I feel like the person that is in touch with their weakness has a better understanding of aspects in life and is able to overcome that.
And we might even need to maybe change the paradigm on the crime being a weakness, because it may not necessarily be a weakness.
Precisely.
In fact, you could be in a position of strength, in a position of posture, because you are able to lean into somebody's discomfort and understand where they are.
Absolutely. You know? I used to grow up with that mentality of, you know, never cry, but I would cry while in my dungeon. I used to call my room the dungeon in the basement, because that was my safe space and my protection away from whatever chaotic mess will be going on in my household. But I would make myself so mad that, you know, a tear will fall. And so people knew, like, if I shed a tear, you should, like,
watch out.
It's not a good thing. But while in command, I found myself crying in front of my soldiers multiple times. Some of it was family related. Some of it was just the pride that I had with growth of watching my soldiers, man, and it brought a tear. And I would tell you, not a single soldier ever, like, you know, looked at me any different. In fact, I would say we always had the most cohesive troop in the squadron. and we had that interaction. My soldiers knew if I was having an off day or a bad day, and we had this two-way check valve of checking on each other and checking on them. And I had these little cards, they're called Thoughtfuls, and inside of it kind of gives you a quote. And I used to hand out to soldiers, and I talked about it on Facebook, and I gave it to soldiers sometimes I didn't even know. And I remember one day a soldier ran up to my aircraft and was like, "Hey, sir, do you have any of those cards? They keep me going."
Oh,
right?
wow.
And it just reminded me of the importance that, sometimes you just never know what people are going through. So it's always okay to check on the other people. But if you're not in touch with your soft side or your soft area, and you're lacking empathy, you're not going to be able to relate to the people to your left and to your right. And so, I don't think there could have been a better way they were able to end this episode today. Mr. Morton, I thank you for coming and bestowing on me a lot of lessons learned, showing,
Thanks for having me.
highlighting things that I got to do better with deliberateness. And I just thank you. We're going to definitely bring you on again in a surprise episode when we bring back a lot of people. But menofjoy.net, this is not a plug. It's the first time I've heard of it, but I recommend people to do that. I recommend that everybody take an opportunity to go out there and just find resources such as this podcast. This is a platform that we are able to share lessons learned with like-minded individuals and people, so that way we don't have to suffer in silence. We don't have to, feel like we're the only ones making these mistakes, or we're the only ones that grew up in our environment that realizing that success is possible and it's achievable. So thank you for being a success. Thank you for being the representation that we seek for our Real Dads, Real Talk on Hana. Thank you for joining us on another fantastic episode. To my favorite behind the camera, Chrissy, thank you for all that you do. Thanks to my wife for continuing supporting and bringing back Real Dads, Real Talk on another motivated level. But until next time, we'll see you guys then. Peace.